Are you making the most out of what it is that you have to say? In this video, I'm going to be talking you through a little bit of an idea of a strategy that you can use to make the most out of the conversations that you're having on various forms of content that you're producing. And if we're meeting for the first time, then hi, my name's Liam, creating content about creating content. And this is one of my one take wonder videos where I'm trying to remove the ums and ers from when I talk, because I'm just putting them in there as filler gaps to let you know that I've got something else to say. And it sounds terrible, doesn't it? So if I do say one of those, I'm going to be keeping myself accountable with the information down here. And fingers crossed I can get through to the end without doing that. So not going to be doing any sneaky edits, and hopefully it will all work out okay. But getting back to this topic, how can we help our message to go further? So for me, I think that it's something that, to be honest, I wasn't a big fan of originally. I've got to hold my hands up to that. I know that I've created a video about a podcast not being a video. It could be a video, but it's not a video. I created that video as one of the first ones on my YouTube channel. And for me, being a podcast fan and somebody who started and built a podcast and had podcast first in mind, I really was against the idea of having somebody take my beloved podcast format and sharing that on another platform, being YouTube. And I really had a problem with that, but it's weird because I work in e-learning and I understand the idea that we are creating content or learning assets for people to learn in the best way possible to suit their consumption habits and to align with their preferences, to give them different experiences, etc. So really, that mindset that I had back in the day was a limiting one in regards to, it's limiting me to the amount of people that would actually ever hear, listen to, or see, if we're thinking about videos, the information that I was trying to put across. But having seen quite a number of people do this really well, I've slowly come round to the idea of actually it's a blooming good idea, and it's something that you should be doing if you're creating content, is having it interchange with the different formats and having it in as many places as you can possibly have. So for me, I think it is something that you should seriously consider doing. It's not a necessity, because you can still do this process if you're thinking just going podcast only or video only. I suppose that would depend on where you think your target audience are, but certainly consider this idea for a strategy for creating your content. Now, first of all, you need to have an idea about what it is that you want to say, but let's assume you've got that covered. Then what we'd need to do is actually capturing you delivering that information. So setting up your camera, not just with the visuals in mind, so not just setting it up so it looks nice and you're talking to camera, but also thinking about the audio. Now, you might need to go to a little bit more effort than perhaps what you might if you're just creating YouTube videos. Because remember, with a podcast, you can only hear. So it's really important that we capture a really good recording. Now, you can do that in a couple of different ways, and I made a video that I'll link up the top there that talks about some effective ways that you can do that on a budget. But if we just quickly go over those, we could have a shotgun mic, so a microphone that's out of shot and it's capturing my voice. You could have a lapel mic that's literally just something sticking to your shirt or your jacket, or even a microphone that's slightly off center or not in front of you, at least when you're delivering your information, knowledge, skills and expertise to your audience, but still having that microphone there so it captures a really good recording of the audio. And as I mentioned, really important that we get that right. And it's something that you should be practicing with video anyway, because if people can't hear you very well, then they're going to turn off a lot quicker than them not liking the visuals of what it is that they see. So if we've sorted those two things out, what we then need to do is record what it is that we've got to say, and then go and do that post-production or go and edit our video or podcast if you're just going down the solo podcast route. Now, if it is that you're capturing both video and podcasts, I would edit the video and simply take the audio from that podcast and then go and do some additional audio post-production on that. I'd also consider, when you are capturing your information, or your recordings in this case, to think about how you deliver the intros. Now, with the video, it would be that you'd be saying, welcome to this video. But if you think about it, if somebody's listening to the podcast, that would potentially confuse them, unless you've already said this podcast was recorded as a video for the YouTube channel. Why don't you go subscribe there if it is that you are on YouTube as well? Again, that could be a good strategy because it could get people to come across to your channel without unaware of you being on YouTube. But just thinking about the start, the beginning of the recording that you're making, and the ending as well, because you might want to say different things. Like, for example, with a podcast, you would say go and subscribe to the podcast, be sure to leave a rating and review. Whereas a rating and review wouldn't really make sense here on YouTube, but a like prompt, not too subtle there, but a like or leaving comments is more appropriate for a YouTube video, for example. So if we've considered the recording aspect, we've done our editing, and we've assembled our pieces of content, then we can distribute them onto the longer form elements of where it is that we're hosting that information. And for me, podcasts are fantastic because if people discover you, they'll go through your back catalogue, but also they'll give you that time to actually get into the rhythm of what it is that you're saying, because they're doing something else 90% of the time. They're commuting, they're doing the dishes, they're working out, whatever it happens to be, and they don't want to be flipping from one podcast to another unless they really need to. And with a video, YouTube is a fantastic way of us presenting people with information in that evergreen format and evergreen content, where people might not necessarily watch it in their droves to start with, and especially if you're a smaller channel like me, you might not be watching this when I release the video, but further down the line, if YouTube thinks it's a video of quality and people have watched it to some extent, it will then start to suggest that with other people, and then the algorithm will potentially take hold and skyrocket a video for you. So we've got our longer form versions of our content delivered and out there ready for the world to see or to hear. Then what we would do is we'd listen back to those particular pieces of recording, and we'd identify areas that have a good hook, so something that would ask a question or to pique the interest of somebody, or some really valuable information that you're sharing to again gain the attention of that audience member on those other social media platforms, where it's more likely that people are just scrolling through the content instead of being more intentional with what it is that they're searching for. So with these shorter clips we've identified, we can then package them up into either a different format. So if it's a podcast, we can create an audio teaser where we have a WAV file and perhaps some animation to create something a bit more exciting. If we've captured the video, we can have the video reframed into the different aspect ratios with one of those hooks or one of those interesting pieces of our recording ready for our audience to view in that shorter format. And then we can sneakily say, oh, if you enjoyed this, make sure you go over to YouTube or to the podcast and listen to the longer version of this particular discussion. Not only that, but we can also convert our verbal recording, so the audio from the video and all the podcast, into a transcript where we can then take that information and share it as an article. We can tweak it so we can make it into a shorter social media post, especially on LinkedIn, for example. And then we can also take any facts and figures or bulleted lists or process, for example, and create them into infographics. So we're really squeezing the most goodness out of our recording wherever possible. I'd love to hear if this is something that you've got in place, or if it's something that you're now going to consider. Any questions, do leave them below. I'd love for you to subscribe and to follow me on my journey if you've got this far, and give a like or a dislike depending on how you felt. clicking on one of these videos will take you to the next one from me, and look forward to catching you soon.